let's be honest, if you moved away from things like HBO Max and Hulu and Netflix and Disney Plus and all those different streaming services, I think it would be fair to say that of all the applications and services in the market that allow you to sort of stream your own multimedia, your TV shows, your box sets, your music, your whatever, in a lovely glossy way that rivals that of streaming platforms, the most popular one is Plex. Plex Media Server is by and large the most popular third-party streaming platform in the world. It allows you to install it on a multitude of different hardware devices and it's pretty good. But in recent years, whether you think of the bloatware that gets added into a Plex Pass subscription or simply the fact that a lot of users aren't really happy to pay for a third-party application to enjoy their multimedia and in some cases make the most of their hardware that they should be able to do anyway, there are going to be users out there thinking about looking at third-party alternatives to Plex. And I keep using that word third-party. A big reason for that is recently NAS brands have been changing a lot of their position on supporting multimedia. One of the loudest and outspoken ones, they're changing their support of not only HEVC or H.265 multimedia using that compression, but on top of that, actually depreciating their own multimedia appliances like Video Station. Now, because of these changes and lots of users in the comments, in particular one user, I went ahead and created a poll here on YouTube community and just kind of asked general users, those that are streaming multimedia from their local NAS or DIY server device, what platforms do they use? I could only put 4 options there because of the way YouTube's polling system works, so I had to kind of cram a lot of ones into that 4th option, but ultimately it came down to Plex Media Server, Emby, Jellyfin, or other, and other being the likes of utilising MX Player, VLC, KODI, Twonky, that kind of stuff, and it was actually kind of surprising. The thing that didn't surprise me was the fact that Plex Media Server was tippity-toppity there. That was no shock whatsoever, but it was the fact that I've always assumed that Emby was the next most popular, but it became abundantly clear that with nearly a third of the votes, 5,000 votes just shy of in a week, it was Jellyfin that took the second place, and from that this video was born. I want to talk about the best alternatives to Plex Media Server at the end of 2024 and 2025. Whether it is that you're already using Plex, you just want to see what else is out there, or you want to make the most of your multimedia hardware and your multimedia software, but you want to do it without having to pay anything extra on top of the money you've paid, this video might well be for you. But let's crack on with our first choice. Let's be honest, if it took a third of the votes, we've got to talk about it first, Jellyfin. Now, one of the most appealing aspects of Jellyfin as your media server software of choice, remember, the server is the NAS, but the apps for your phones, your TV, or whatever are called clients. Jellyfin is by and large exclusively free. The main server application and client apps are free in numerous locations there. Also, it is hugely customizable. Again, when you compare it to something like Plex Media Server, the sheer scope of options and changes you can make are huge. And if you boil it down to transcoding, I might add, or conversions, for those that want to take advantage of the hardware in their system to reshape files on the fly to more limited bandwidth that can remote access users, there is a wide degree of control. Probably one of the best out there in terms of manually configured conversions and transcoding there. Also, there is a plugins database there, and there are numerous apps appearing on different platforms gradually over time. It isn't the easiest platform to use. It lacks some of the ease of use of Plex Media Server, but it makes up for it with being hugely customizable and allowing you, particularly in the case of metadata scraping, a wider degree of customization and different repositories and sources to pull that metadata from and storing it locally in a far more customizable fashion compared to that of Plex Media Server. Now, what does it lack compared to Plex? Well, I've kind of alluded to a couple of them there. Number one, the settings of Jellyfin are not that straightforward. Jellyfin can be very, very technical to the very, very non-network, non-server initiated there. And setting it up correctly for the first time can be complicated, particularly remote access protocol as well. Unlike paid platforms like Plex and Emby that we'll of course talk about in a moment, Jellyfin, being completely free, does have limited scope for remote access in an easy way, but you can bind it, for example, via the installation on a Synology NAS, that you can bind it to your Synology Quick Connect account. You can actually use Synology's own, and in the case of other NAS brands, their own remote access relay portal to access your server remotely there. But just getting Jellyfin on a NAS, not just Synology but other brands too, is not that straightforward. And the same goes for the client applications for your devices. The Jellyfin client app and indeed the Jellyfin server application is not widely available. Very few NAS app centers actually include the Jellyfin manual installer. In the case of Synology, for example, if you're moving away from Video Station, I had to go to a third-party unofficial repository called Syno Community, add that repository to my Synology NAS, then having to download it and some add-ons there to get it to work, all the time with the Synology warning me that I'm using an app that it was not tailored for the device by Synology and is not officially supported there, which can make people nervous. The same goes if you're going to allow your system to be remote accessed by family members, perhaps less technically knowledgeable. Those are users that aren't going to be as comfortable with the fact that the Jellyfin application is not so widely available for client devices as the like of Plex. There is no application for closed console systems there. Amazon Fire TV and some streaming boxes require you to use third-party file explorer tools to actually download and install them unofficially there. All of this adds up to, ultimately, when you look across the whole field of using Jellyfin, a far more inconsistent experience to that of Plex. You are getting it completely for free, but you aren't paying with money, you're paying with time. More time setting it up, more time setting it up with family members who may need a little bit of a handhold, and more time setting up remote access protocol. It's by no means complicated in the extreme, but it would be remiss of me to call it as easy as Plex Media Server.
Move this man!
Next up, we're of course going to talk about Emby. Now, before we even get into it, why did I believe that Emby was the next best option compared to that of Jellyfin? Well, largely it's because the majority of NAS platforms that include a download for Plex Media Server also include a download for Emby. They wouldn't do that unless there was demand. Also, Emby being a paid premium platform does allow it a lot more flexibility and kind of push to be in front of users in a way that Jellyfin doesn't, and therefore Jellyfin can often be transcribed as being the more technically kind of DIY-ish, I install VLC and WinRAR and I've never paid for it point of view. However, it is too oversimplified there, and even if you only look at that poll that I showed at the beginning of the video as just a canvas of a small subset of an already enthusiast audience, it still has to be said that Emby, it kind of gets very, very close to what Plex offers, but misses the boat on a few occasions. We'll get to that in a second. With Emby, which by the way is a very good application despite that rather negative introduction there. Number one, it offers the same, if not slightly more, level of customization and control as that of Jellyfin. And indeed, it actually is a little bit more of a consistent experience too. The presentation of the GUI, the setup wizard, and the number of options afforded to you at the beginning without going into advanced tabs or adding on plugins is actually broader than that of Jellyfin. Now, you would expect it to be a little bit more simplified for a paid platform, which have a tendency to have some hand-holding and people are paying for that. Emby does give you a decent amount of customization in terms of the user interface and the playback models with the Stats for Nerd plugin that you can add on either within the initial installation, or there are exceedingly improved ones inside the plugin center. Talking of that plugin center, there is absolutely loads of plugins, some of them very NAS specific, some of them file management. Hell, there's a surveillance and CCTV application on there, customized offline conversion applications on there, the ability to add additional codits and plugins and packs are all built into Emby there, which again is very rare for a paid platform when generally paid multimedia platforms are a great deal more controlled. Plex being a classic example there of where you pay over the odds, but at the same time you don't have the same degree of control or access to your hardware as you can in some of the other applications in the market. Another advantage that Emby has over Jellyfin is the fact that as it's a paid platform, it has a great deal more money to spend on quality control and development. And one of those great areas of development are client applications. Now, Emby doesn't have the same wide range of client device applications from TVs all the way through to your smartphone in your pocket and tablet that Plex has. but it gets pretty darn close. However, we've got to discuss the big green elephant in the room. Emby is that paid service, much like Plex. And notwithstanding that, much like Plex, Emby asks you to pay for hardware transcoding and conversions, i.e. having to pay extra to use the hardware you've already bought to its fullest extent. On top of that, if you don't use the Premier subscription service, which is their equivalent of Plex Pass, then for different applications, such as family members who may be installing it on a smart TV or their own phone, or a TV they've got in their den or an old PS3, the problem is the Emby application needs to be paid for at $4.99 per client device. Or if you have the Premier application, you get access to them for free. But it's not accessible directly from the App Center per se. You do need to install it and then log in with your details. But ultimately, it leads to a little bit more of an inconsistent experience. But also, Emby, unlike Plex, I find that Emby actually gives you less in the free tier when it comes to your extended users than Plex gives you in the free tier. Yes, both of them require you to pay a premium service to take advantage of hardware transcoding and the hardware you've got and some of the extra features, but Plex on its own still allows all of your connected users, for the most part, to download the client apps and watch multimedia easy in a way that Emby doesn't really give to you. Now, all this would be fine if Emby costs less than Plex, and it's going to get into a bit of a grey area here. It sort of does and it doesn't. When you look at the lifetime pass and you look at the monthly pass, the prices are actually largely identical. But on an annual pass, Emby actually costs more than Plex, which can be very off-putting, because I think a lot of users who are thinking about moving away from Plex and onto Emby, or moving away from streaming services onto Emby, are going to find it very difficult to palate the fact that you get a free trial and then you either have to pay for a month or forever, or end up paying for more versus Plex. And I think that gives Plex a tremendous advantage. Now, obviously, these prices can change. Plex is still trying to find ways to subsidise its funding model. And I think Plex are going to put the prices up. But at least right now, I'm kind of surprised that an annual Emby membership costs more than Plex. Nevertheless, with a huge amount of customization, a huge amount of plug-in control, and a huge amount of flexibility in what it can do, alongside things like share watching and stuff like that, some of which are built into the free model anyway, Emby is still a great shout for those of you that don't really want to stay with Plex, but do want to go for a more flexible, customizable platform that can still support some of those elderly or distant relatives that maybe aren't so technologically advanced. Now, there are going to be some of you watching this that are going to say, what are you putting including KODI for? KODI doesn't count. KODI is a client application. It is not a server application. And for the most part, you are correct, with the exception of using some third-party app installations with QNAP or Asustor, which do actually allow you to install KODI as a semi-server application unofficially. For the most part, KODI is just a client tool. So what the hell is it doing in this list? Well, I would say straight away that there are a lot of users that have never touched Plex, never touched Emby, and never touched Jellyfin. The reason being that they just had their NAS set up as a simple SMB share, and then from there installed KODI on all of their devices. KODI can be installed on a multitude of different devices, although it has been pulled from numerous application stores for reasons of legality, something we'll touch on later on. But KODI, as a means of enjoying the media on your NAS, is incredibly advanced. All the NAS has to do is say, here are your movies, here are the directories, and KODI takes care of the rest. Notwithstanding, it is hugely customizable, and the GUI is pretty straightforward and easy to use, whether it is from the comfort of your sofa with a remote or on a desktop or a mobile phone. And by the way, if you're not using the Confluent skin, I don't even want to talk to you. KODI gives a huge ease of use balance versus customization and control, with advanced, expert and intermediary settings for you to set up very early out the gate. Also, the range of plugins is probably bigger than any other application I'm going to talk about today. A vast array of tools, add-ons and services for live TV, for streaming services, or bolting on other services, including Plex, Emby and Jellyfin, by the way, within KODI as a single user interface for your live TV, for your streaming services, and for the data and media on your local access service there. On top of that, you can take advantage of the relay services, just like we mentioned earlier on with Jellyfin, such as Synology Quick Connect, QNAP, QNAP Cloud, and use those remote access relays to connect KODI remotely onto the NAS you may have elsewhere, which is going to be great for connecting relatives. Also, KODI has a wider degree of support of multimedia as well, which can be rolled up over time. And most of all, it's free. It's free as Jellyfin and more widely available. So why the hell is it so low in this list? And what are the problems? Well, let me save you the trouble of putting in the comments. Number one, the legality. There are just too many users, and by users I mean companies, I mean small Eastern outfits that have exploited KODI to provide streaming boxes in the market. Then there are illegal torrent utilization within KODI. All of this has muddied the name of KODI as a platform, and chances are, like I've done with other videos in the past that feature KODI, YouTube has a tendency to flag these videos completely unnecessarily. KODI has long since become an unfortunate watchword of dodgy as hell. Also, the application, although supported and in their latest revisions of KODI, I believe they're on version 21, being even more advanced every time, the ease of installation and availability is mixed at best. As mentioned, a lot of app centers do not provide the app. Hell, if you are using an Amazon Fire TV, you have to use, again, a third-party installation method there as a downloader tool and then into a file explorer to even get KODI on it. Same goes for Roku and a bunch of other devices as well. And although it's not universally unavailable, it is very hard to come by. Also, accessing those remote access servers I mentioned earlier on, whether it is you're going to be using dynamic naming services or you're going to be utilizing the first party relay service from Synology, QNAP, Asustor, TerraMaster, whatever, it's not that straightforward, and just adding in the URL is not enough. You've got to select the right file protocol. You've got to enable the remote access on the NAS. You've got to add the right security credentials. It is not that straightforward. But it has to be said that in terms of accessing your media in a very customizable and upgradable way for free is a great option, and one I think some users, despite, let's say, dodgy impressions that KODI users may have created in the past in terms of illegality, it's still a great platform to maybe pursue, but just keep it legal.
Ah, so you come crawling back, you cheap sack of shit.
If I thought I was going to annoy people by including KODI in a list like this, including DLNA and UpNp in this list, I think it's going to smash that dislike button like you won't believe. If you want the most low impact, simplified, easy way to access your media on your NAS in a local area environment, it's just the best way to do it. Digital Living Network Alliance certification takes advantage of Universal Plug and Play UpNp to stream multimedia easily. It doesn't give huge write control. You can't really edit files easily this way, but you can read files very easily this way. And most low-level network accessible multimedia devices will access it. On top of that, most NAS devices all arrive with a UpNp and or DLNA multimedia server tool built in, allowing you to access the content of your NAS remotely over the local area network very easily. There are even ways with some very sus connections to allow remote access to a DLNA/UpNp server, but it does require port forwarding, and I wouldn't recommend it to everyone. Now, in the past, I never would have made it wouldn't have made it onto the list because it's just, one, it's too bare bones, it's file folder breadcrumb level access, and it just didn't have the customization control or services built in. But modern DLNA/UpNp servers have actually got quite a lot of options built in, from thumbnail control to conversions of audio and video in advance. Generally, in the past, if you're trying to access a server via DLNA and you weren't supporting the file format or compression of the file, it just wouldn't play it. But modern NAS devices, Synology included, within their multimedia server app, actually provide conversion tools native to the multimedia server tool, allowing you to actually force the system to convert photo and video files for DLNA playback, which is huge. Also, DLNA/UpNp is completely free, low resource impact and universally supported. Remote access is largely impossible unless you know what you are doing and don't mind getting things insecure. But for a local access media server, there really is very few reasons these days, short of a pretty user interface, to not use simple DLNA or UpNp. You'll miss out on metadata scraping, you will miss out on all those wonderful little graphics, but given that the likes of VLC, MX Player and a multitude of simple media DLNA streaming server applications on Fire TV, on Roku, on Google TV, on probably Apple TV as well I assume, are out there, it is silly to overlook the use of DLNA and UpNp support on NAS devices to enjoy your multimedia if you're migrating away from Plex. But there you go, those are 4 main alternatives to using Plex in 2024 and 2025. Let me know what you guys think. I'm pretty sure I've hacked some people off of those last 2 options. I'd love to talk about it with you in the comments. If you want to talk about this more or in a follow-up video, we've already done direct comparisons of Plex versus Jellyfin, Jellyfin versus Emby, Emby versus Plex, and all 3 in the article I've referenced throughout this video, and it's all linked in the description below. We go into a lot more detail about metadata scraping, playback, user interfaces, price, the works. Do check those out. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.